Hello and welcome. My name is Olga Hakova. I am a Deputy Director at the Global Energy Center here at the Atlantic Council. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this event where we talk about US and Romania cooperation on climate and energy and share how we move forward on these shared objectives. We are honored to be joined today by two key officials who are instrumental to this partnership. His Excellency Sebastian Burduja, who is the Minister of Energy in Romania, and Ambassador Geoffrey Pyatt, Assistant Secretary at the Bureau of Energy Resources at the Department of State. But before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping items that I want to mention. This conversation is hosted by the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center and the Atlantic Council Europe Center. This is a public discussion. It's on the record and will also be streaming on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and this recording will be available afterwards as well. For those of you on Twitter, I encourage you to follow along using hashtags ACEnergy and ACEurope. And if you are joining us virtually, I encourage you to submit questions online, and it is at askac.org. Once again, askac.org. It's really easy to submit. For our in-person audience, we will be taking some questions towards the end of the conversation, so I encourage you to raise your hand, and we have some mic runners who will be able to come to you. With that, let's begin with some opening remarks from His Excellency Andrei Muraru, who is the Romanian ambassador to the United States. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olga, and thank you all for being here. In-person audience, where if you follow us virtually, dear Minister Burduja, dear Ambassador Pyatt, distinguished audience, dear friends, it is my great pleasure to be again at the Atlantic Council, our partners and our friends, and leading experts in energy and climate, topics of utmost importance to both Romania and the United States. As we strive to consolidate energy security, accelerate the energy transition, and power a sustainable future, these are not only our strategic imperatives, but also our shared objectives. Both our countries are working towards building smart and sustainable economies, and the United States has no better partner than Romania in delivering an economy that is both highly digitalized and environmentally sustainable. And what better example of joint action towards the tech-driven energy of the future than small modular nuclear reactors, where Romania is a first mover in deploying a first-of-a-kind US-made SMR. Both our countries understand that energy security is national security, and that providing security and prosperity to our citizens increasingly means being able to supply sustainable and affordable energy. Given its balanced energy mix, from gas in the Black Sea to nuclear power generation to renewables, whether we speak about hydro or wind and solar, Romania is set to become a regional energy powerhouse and top regional energy provider. And it will do so with the United States by its side. Both our countries value alliances and partnerships, of course, as well as close transatlantic cooperation in order to ensure European energy security and resilience. Russia's brutal war against Ukraine has brought these issues into sharp focus. It has also made us more united and more determined to stand against energy blackmail and stand together again with Ukraine and Moldova. Romania will continue to support its neighbors and be a key partner to the United States in providing energy security in Central and Eastern Europe. A lot of amazing work, simply amazing work has been accomplished in building a greener future while strengthening energy security. A lot of work is also still ahead, with both unique opportunities and complex challenges. So we are here to tackle them together. Thank you all again.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. What an excellent way to start this conversation. Ambassador, Minister, you are no strangers to the Council, so I just want to take this opportunity to welcome you back. And I'm so glad that you're here, especially as we're having this conversation at a time where climate and energy security are so closely tied to economic issues, geopolitical developments, and of course, heart security right now especially. This event also comes on the heels of US and Romania celebrating 25 years of strategic cooperation, strategic relationship. But we all know that that relationship has been going on for much longer than 25 years. I'd like to kick off this conversation with more of a broader question to get us started, especially as we are on the verge of entering the second winter of Russia's brutal attack on Ukraine, the second winter of war. How has the energy crisis and Russia's brutal attack changed the relationship between US and Romania? And Minister, if you don't mind, I would love to start with you.
Well, first of all, thank you for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much, Ambassador and dear friend of Romania and of our region. It's really a blessing to have somebody who really gets it here in Washington, deeply understands the region. And thank you to the Council for always welcoming us and opening its doors to Romania, and to myself as a former Millennium Fellow. You know, the Russian aggression in Ukraine has changed the region forever, in my opinion. And for a while, the first instinct that we had in Romania was to say, hey, we told you so. This was coming. And that's because we had the quote-unquote privilege of being in a neighborhood that was always under the threat of Russian aggression, be it frozen conflicts at our borders in Transnistria, right by Moldova and Romania and Ukraine, or similar pressures in using energy as a weapon. Russia has done it before in previous decades. So this is not necessarily new, and their tactics are, at least when it comes to Western democracies, I think they're similar to what they used to do, 50, 60, 70 years ago, which is one, to seed mistrust between citizens and freely elected governments. And that's why you see a rise of populism. Much of it is fueled with Russian money and Russian interests. And then seed division among Western liberal democracies, which again, they've been quite successful in doing. And you see very different perspectives now in the EU, and different topics such as entry into the Schengen area, something that Romania has fulfilled years ago, and it is vetoed by one or two member states, one in particular. And so coming back to the war, it obviously puts a lot of these pressures front and center on our citizens, and that means safety concerns. It means being concerned about the utility bills that come at the end of the month. And we've had to put in a lot of effort from our state budget to make sure that utility prices stay relatively stable for citizens and for companies alike.
Thank you so much for mentioning the disinformation, because that feels like we're also fighting a disinformation war at the same time, and energy plays such a massive part of that. Ambassador, I'd love to go to you next on your thoughts on how the relationship has changed.
So thank you, Olga, and again, thank you for having me back here. It's such a thrill to be here with the minister, and as the ambassador said, we have no better partner in Europe on these energy issues. The minister and I had a great conversation yesterday, and one of the areas of focus was the visit that I will be making to Bucharest early next month for the 3C Summit. Right. My third visit to Romania as Assistant Secretary, which is not an accident and reflects what a very strong partner Romania has been, both bilaterally but also in the larger regional context. And I'll talk later about both the Ukraine-Moldova specific aspect of that, but you were starting with the transatlantic energy relationship. And I think one thing that's clear, as the minister said very well, is that Putin's effort to weaponize the winter and to use energy as one of the tools of his assault on Ukraine has utterly failed. Europe has decoupled itself from Russian energy supplies much more quickly than I think many expected. Europe is in a relatively strong position heading into this next winter, in part thanks to the work that we have done transatlantically through the US-EU Energy Council, the work of American gas producers, but also because of the efforts that are being made on both sides of the Atlantic to accelerate our energy transition. And that's one of the other unexpected, unpredicted consequences of this brutal invasion, is that on both sides of the Atlantic, we are doubling down on our energy transition. Romania is a fantastic partner in that regard. It's a country which is on the road to soon being Europe's largest gas producer, but it's also a country with whom the United States and ENR has an excellent partnership on offshore wind, working with the government as it develops a legal framework, hopefully to attract American and other foreign investment to offshore wind possibilities. I'm very excited the work that we will do ahead on issues of clean hydrogen, on issues of carbon management, on issues of electrification, and especially, and this fits into the 3Cs context, how we develop the grid capacity across the region that's necessary for supporting a decarbonized economy. So this is just an incredibly lucrative part of our broader transatlantic energy relationship. And it's also, as you alluded to, a really strong pillar of an overall U.S. strategic alliance with Romania. So I'm really proud to have been a contributor to this. I'm very excited to be heading back for 3Cs. But what I'm most excited about is the prospects we have to accomplish significant things in the future.
Really glad that you mentioned 3Cs. We will come back to that in a couple of questions. But I want to follow up on something that you said regarding, thinking about how prepared we are for the next winter. In terms of the storage levels, of course, Europe is doing so much better. And the Transatlantic Partnership has played an important role in that. But overall, how do you feel, even just with the storage levels being this high, do you feel like Europe is ready? Do you feel good about the upcoming winter? And from the U.S. perspective, are there additional things that U.S. can do to support this? And what kind of scenarios are you most concerned about, even potentially black swan events or unexpected things happening? Because we've seen, even with the lower pricing on the lower prices now, we're still seeing some events and how they're impacting the prices almost immediately. So going into the winter, what keeps you up at night?
Well, I'll start off on a lighter note. And
Yes.
I took over this mandate about a month and a week ago, or a few weeks. And one of the first things I was told is you better prepare for winter. And we're forming a winter task force in the government, and the ministry has traditionally done this. And it's August, but we still need to get ready. And the data we're getting from our gas operator and storage provider is that we're doing very well. Essentially, we've exceeded all the targets that we have committed to. In front of the EU, we are at over 80% storage capacity, and we will exceed 90% by September 1st, which was our target with the Commission. And we don't expect to have any issues if the winter will be, relatively normal, if it won't be excessively harsh. Our backup, obviously, is the gas from Azerbaijan, where we have a reserve capacity that is there available for us. It was there last winter. We didn't have to call on it, but it's there this winter as well in case we need it. And alternatively, there are other options for the south and LNG terminals south of Romania. But again, we're sort of lucky because we can be self-reliant in many ways. And we're doing our best now to provide for the security of Moldova as well. As a matter of fact, I think since yesterday, Moldova has started storing gas in our storage facilities in Romania as well.
Ambassador, any additional thoughts on that?
So, as Secretary Blinken likes to say, this is another one of those areas where Putin has suffered an enormous strategic failure, because I don't think Europe is ever again going to look to Russia as an energy supplier. We're in a good position right now. We don't know what the weather is going to be like, but we are on track to meet or exceed the target that we set in the US-EU task force of delivering 50 BCM or more of US LNG to Europe. There has been very rapid expansion of liquefaction capacity, including, as the minister alluded to, the new FSRU in Alexandropoli, which I'm very proud of the work that we have done with our Greek allies on that. And Romania is very much an interested party when it comes to that facility. But equally important, as we look to the out years, as we look to 2025, U.S. Overall liquefaction export capacity will be increased by about 50% based on projects that have already reached FID, which are underway. So you are looking at a much deeper global gas supply as we get into 2025. And I think this is the reality of strategic failure that Putin faces. We all talked before February of last year about Europe's dependence on Russian gas, but the other side of that coin was Russia's dependence on the European market. And that market has now gone away, and you can see the price that Russia is paying and what's happening to the ruble exchange rate and the long-term downward trajectory of Russia's oil and gas industry.
Absolutely. In terms of the kind of broader lessons learned over a year and a half now, Minister Burduja, in terms of the future of gas in Europe's energy mix, has that changed quite a bit due to the energy crisis, as we had some time to kind of think through of the developments the last winter and how expensive and tough that was? And is that cohesive across Europe, or do you feel like there's some different views even across the region?
Certainly there's differences. And it's very hard to do it all and do it all at once. To have, cheap energy, to have safe energy that's independent of Russia, and to have completely green energy. It's a trilemma that is unsolvable, in my opinion, in the short term. So then we need a roadmap for where we're going, and Romania has strongly supported the idea that gas should be a transition fuel, and it should be allowed as such. And we're doing that both from a pragmatic standpoint, because we need, if we're going to replace coal, and we've committed to replacing coal very aggressively over the next few years, at least we need to put something instead of coal that will be able to have a similar production profile, which is baseload and can be relatively flexible in turning on and off for balancing the grid. So in addition to that, we obviously have a lot of gas in the Black Sea. And about a month and a half ago, OMV Petrom and Romgaz announced the final investment decision in Neptune Deep, which promises to have anywhere between 100 and 200 BCMs of gas, which will increase our gas production annually by, 50, 60, 70%, a huge number, and it will make Romania the #1 gas producer in the world, as Mr. Assistant Secretary said earlier. So we absolutely support the idea that gas is needed. I don't know what we would have done without gas in the current crisis, including gas from the US. For the medium to long term, I think that's where nuclear comes in, and SMRs, and all the other good things we're working on. But short term, you definitely need gas as a transition fuel.
Quick follow-up, rough timeline around Neptune development?
January 2027. It's all slated to begin then, and it's a €4 billion investment. Every day counts. Every day of delay means losing money, and I'm very confident that the two companies that are involved there will do their absolute best to make sure that the investment happens. And by the way, I think it's a strong signal that you can invest in the Black Sea, despite security concerns. The fact that two major companies are putting in all this money to access these resources, along with Black Sea Oil and Gas, a Carlyle Group company that is already extracting gas in the near shore in the Black Sea. I think that's all a positive signal to investors who want to look at the Black Sea, for instance, with offshore wind and other types of investments in the years to come.
Thank you, Minister. So that's a really great success story. But Ambassador, I'm going to turn to you. Have you heard any concerns from, especially maybe U.S. companies or other Western companies, in terms of the risks, or them being a bit hesitant to invest around the Black Sea region, even although we are having some success stories, as the Minister mentioned?
You can't ignore what Russia is doing every single day in Ukraine, including the tragic attacks just this morning in Kyiv and Ivano-Frankivsk and elsewhere. But as the minister said, Romania is a NATO ally. It lives under the Article 5 commitment that we have made to the people of Romania. And I see this only in terms of opportunities. There's the important example of Carlyle, Black Sea Oil and Gas, and the resolution of some of the issues there a few months ago, very important signal to the market. And then really significantly, and I really want to come back on the question of nuclear and SMRs, because the United States government has made a huge bet on our nuclear energy partnership with Romania, both in terms of the modernization of the Cernavodă complex, but really importantly with NuScale's SMR project. First of its kind, an investment which reflects not just U.S. government involvement and American companies' involvement, but also allies and partners like Korea, like Japan. So this is truly a multinational undertaking in a technology that is absolutely critical to our future decarbonization strategy. And as I was sharing with the minister, I've had conversations in Kazakhstan, in Ghana, all across Europe, in Latin America, with governments interested in the SMR technology. Romania is the one country in the world where we are looking to accomplish this deployment first outside the U.S. And so it's a very important path setter, and the fact that we are able to do this with our Romanian allies is a reflection both of the very strong alliance partnership, but also the human capital and the expertise, the long experience that Romania has with civil nuclear power, and the depth of expertise that we are able to tap into, which NuScale is able to tap into, and our hope of developing Romania as a hub for the global deployment of these SMR technologies.
Thank you so much for mentioning nuclear. That's a really great transition. Minister Burduja, I will go to you to get your opinion on what is the significance of this cooperation on nuclear energy and to a broader geopolitical ties. And also, what is Romania's kind of global role in deploying this some of the newer technologies? And in addition to that, how are the partners working together to secure diverse and secure supply chains when it comes to nuclear energy? Because we know that's another frontier that's being weaponized.
Again, on a lighter note, going back to my days at Stanford, when I was asked to introduce myself, I would say, "Hey, I'm Sebastian, I'm from Romania, and I'm neither a gymnast nor a vampire." But I could have as well said, "And neither am I a nuclear scientist," because I think Romania is well known and recognized for the quality of its nuclear engineers. And it's not a coincidence that we're now essentially leading the race for having the first SMR deployed outside the US or maybe even globally. That speaks to a commitment that the country has made long ago to civil nuclear programs, to STEM education more broadly. Some of the best STEM graduates are from Romania. And for a country of 20 million, if you just look at the rankings, and now I speak as the previous Minister of Research, in all the international competitions, physics, math, computer science, we're almost every year top 3 in the world, which speaks a lot to the fact that there is potential, there is commitment. There's a commitment to Western technology, and all our nuclear system is based on Western technologies that have nothing to do with Russia, and I think that's important. As well as on an integrated nuclear cycle that we've relied on for many years now, from production of uranium to heavy water, which we need in Cernavodă, to the actual nuclear power plant. So you have my full commitment, you have the government's full commitment, and we want to see that by the end of this decade, the first SMRs will appear in Romania. And to echo what the Assistant Secretary very correctly said, the interest is huge, not just beyond Romania, but even in the local market. We have a lot of large industrial producers, large municipalities that are thinking about this technology to replace coal-based plants, coal-based district heating systems, and many other things.
No, it's so exciting to see the momentum, especially over the last couple of years in this area. Assistant Secretary Pyatt, I made you a promise that I will go back to the 3 Cs conversation. So Romania is hosting 3 Cs this year. It's coming up in just a couple of weeks now. It's really, really exciting. But in terms of U.S. engagement, how do you see this year being important in terms of, what would you like to see be done, developed as a result of the business forum, of the ministerial? How has U.S. engaged in the past in the 3 Cs, and how has that engagement changed now, and the role and importance of the 3 Cs initiative because of the energy crisis, because of Russia's brutal attack on Ukraine?
So I should start, Olga, by giving credit to the Atlantic Council and a lot of friends here who were so instrumental in developing this 3Cs vision. And I think it's worth remembering that all of this foundational work was done long before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And everything that we have done over the years to build this 3Cs concept and to build the connectivity north-south in Europe was validated by February 24th. And the invasion of Ukraine, because it reinforced the critical importance of this axis of cooperation, whether it's in terms of what the Baltic 3Cs countries are doing in their desynchronization and the Brel separation from Russia, or what Romania has been leading in terms of the connectivity to the south. I'm particularly excited also, of course, given my time in Athens, that this 3C summit will see the formalization of Greece's membership, and which really completes the circuit in terms of the opportunities for deepening cooperation along a European north-south axis that's going to be so important to the future and how we think about connectivity between a peaceful, sovereign European Ukraine and the rest of Europe, but also down into the Gulf region and beyond that to Asia. I think there are enormous possibilities to do more in the energy area that I'm responsible for. Of course, in terms of LNG and pipelines and all of that, but critically also in terms of electricity interconnection, moving clean electrons from north to south, from a region in southern Europe, which has bountiful wind and sunlight, to areas that have higher demand and fewer of those renewable resources in the north. So we see that as a very lucrative area of further cooperation. And frankly, one of the reasons that I'm so focused on and so pleased to be joining the very large US delegation for the 3C Summit is precisely because it gives us an opportunity to think about where we want to go. And it complements what Secretary Blinken was doing in June at the Ukraine Recovery Conference. And whatever the map of Europe looks like at the end of this terrible war, Ukraine and the Ukrainian economy is going to be a significant driver. It's also going to be a big part of the energy story. So how the 3Cs countries interface with the Ukraine that is in the process of reorienting its energy system entirely towards the West and decoupling from Russia. Very important opportunities there for the further decarbonization and accelerating work together on civil nuclear, on green hydrogen, on novel energy storage, on all of these aspects of the energy economy that are going to be transformed, both by the opportunities, but also by the policy directives that are coming from the United States and from Europe.
And thank you so much for mentioning Atlantic Council's role and engagement. Ian Brzezinski, of course, has been spearheading these efforts from the Atlantic Council side, and the Global Energy Center has been involved on the energy pillar of it. Of course, 3Cs is not just energy, it's transport, it's digital as well. Minister, what would make this a successful summit for you?
Well, I think when it comes to the 3Cs initiative, what has happened in the past couple of years completely validates the premise of the initiative itself. It's the eastern flank. It's a new axis, not just east-west, but north-south. It's about connectivity and prosperity among all these different countries. And I think when we're talking about rebuilding Ukraine, which will happen, and hopefully will happen sooner, then the 3Cs initiative countries will be there at the forefront, and they will be critical in rebuilding Ukraine. And I think that when Ukraine has that opportunity, which it has the moral right to have, to rebuild and reinvent itself, it needs to leapfrog. It needs to adopt the latest technologies, including in energy. Where else to look for than in its close neighborhoods at countries like Romania, like Poland, and others that have very steadfastly stood their ground against the Russian invasion, and on the side of Ukraine and Moldova and others that are victims of this war, to see how these technologies can work, to adopt them, replicate them, improve them, and essentially reinvent, as I said. So we're very excited about the event. Everybody back home is, from the president to the prime minister and everybody else who's worked very hard to make this a success. I know there's interest in Ukraine and Moldova to join in a different capacity. So hopefully we all support that effort and make sure that, again, as we look ahead, as we look to rebuilding, we can use this initiative to support that effort.
Thank you for mentioning Moldova in Ukraine. To zoom out a little bit outside of the 3Cs initiative, could you summarize kind of the support that's been given so far? What additional issues and concerns and challenges should we expect in terms of support that's needed coming into this winter? And what are some roadblocks and how do we overcome them together to Transatlantic cooperation? Minister, if you want to kick off, and then we'll go to Ambassador.
Well, I mean, that's why I'm here, to make sure that we advance some of these very ambitious projects. And, you know, just a few years ago, I think that if you had spoken about a small modular reactor, people would look at you and think you're crazy, that this cannot be done. The fact that we are, you know, 3, 4, maybe 5 years away from the first SMR being put together and in operation and in Romania, for us, it's a matter of tremendous national pride. And again, I think that public support for this new technology is fundamental, and Romania has the essential elements to make sure that the public does support this new technology. But for that, I think we need to all work together to explain it and to explain that it is very safe, that it has been in operation for many years. And I've gotten this question as a minister. I think it was my first TV interview. And it was just this, you know, how can you trust this technology? It's so new. And I said, well, it's not that new. And you've had it on submarines and, you know, planes on ships and so on and so forth. So those are very good arguments that we just need to be very open with the public and present them very confidently, because we have nothing to shy away from. This technology has been proven safe. It's guaranteed by our strategic partner, and we're very, very confident that it will change the face of our energy sector.
Thank you. Public support and broader educational efforts are so important when we talk about developing newer or existing technologies even. Ambassador, to kind of go back to the question around taking stock of the support provided so far to Moldova, to Ukraine, and some of the near-term initiatives that you're thinking through in partnership with Romania.
Yeah, well, thank you for raising that, Olga. And it reminds me, last September at the UN General Assembly, I was part of a meeting between Romania's foreign minister and then Deputy Secretary Wendy Sherman. And the foreign minister was talking about the efforts that Romania had made to launch a trilateral energy-focused conversation between Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine. The most natural thing in the world to anybody who had spent time in the region and understood how, for instance, the power from Zaporizhia was also exported into Moldova, and the connections also historically of that part of the country. That was about a month before Vladimir Putin began this effort to dismantle the Ukrainian energy grid. And when I was asked by the White House to lead the US government effort to build resilience in the Ukrainian energy system, Romania was really one of our most important partners in that undertaking, and very, very grateful. And that effort continues to this day. We continue our work with our Ukrainian partners, and we are doing everything in our power to harden the Ukrainian energy grid as we get ready for another winter of this war and Putin's further weaponization of that winter. But I should also say a word on Moldova, because Romania has really punched far above its weight in terms of the exceptional support that the government of Romania has provided to the people of Moldova. This is a unique moment in Moldova's history. We have a strong pro-Western government in a country that has historically relied on Russia for almost all of its power, with much of that energy, especially the heating in the winter, coming from the occupied region of Transnistria. So we are in a much better position today. Moldova is in a much better position today, thanks largely to the partnership and support that Romania has provided. I know the European Union is fully committed to supporting this trajectory as well, and I heard that when I was in Brussels in the spring with Secretary of State Blinken. The United States government, the US Congress, has provided $300 million, which is an extraordinary sum of money for a country as small as Moldova, to help Moldova to continue to reorient its energy system away from Russia and towards Europe. And I'm quite confident in saying, on this issue in particular, there is no more important EU partner for Moldova than its neighbor in Romania. And we're very grateful for the leadership that's been shown there. And we're committed to synchronizing our efforts. And that will be very much part of my agenda when I'm in Bucharest again as well.
We're already starting to get some really excellent questions coming in, and this one relates directly to this previous conversation, so I'll jump to that if you don't mind. There's a question around building out even further some of the southeastern European interconnections to the LNG ports to Moldova and Ukraine to be able to expand that capacity to get more gas to Ukraine. And I would even take that question one step further and kind of think through the future of Ukraine and its gas development potential too, and kind of thinking of a two-way, further building out integrations two-way to where in the future Ukraine can go back to being a robust energy exporter as well.
Well, we're working on that. And, a lot of our interconnectivity capacity has increased in recent years, with Moldova especially, but happy to put more resources in doing the same with Ukraine, with Bulgaria, with Hungary. As a matter of fact, as the gas from Neptune Deep starts coming in 2027, we'll need that capacity to export much of what will be extracted from there. So it's a strategic interest, and it's an economic interest for our country. Absolutely.
Thank you. And anything else you wanted to add? I know you mentioned.
So just to say, for 2 decades, a fundamental principle of American energy policy in Europe has been the diversification of sources and routes. The invasion of Ukraine has demonstrated how critically important that was. Europe itself is going through a profound reorientation of its energy system, and is going to need to find new sources, which are non-Russian sources of gas, especially in this transition period. So that both the Balkan energy island and that whole southeastern energy corridor is going to be critically important. That's why all of the work that I and my team have been doing in Turkey, in Greece, through the multiple regasification projects that we've seen there, new pipelines like the IGB, of course, the Southern Gas Corridor, the TAP pipeline. This is all part of building a new architecture. And Romania is in so many ways the hub for much of that, because it's right in the middle of Europe, because it has the connectivity to Ukraine and the very large traditional flow of Russian gas that came through Ukraine, and through Bulgaria and Greece, the access to the Eastern Mediterranean and the energy resources of the Middle East.
Thank you so much. We're getting just a couple of additional questions around LNG and natural gas. So if you don't mind, I'm going to try to lump them all together, and that way we can cover that comprehensively. There's a question around expanding Romania's storage, like gas storage specifically. I would also add on to that a question around better utilization of Ukraine's storage too, because we know some of that is still quite unused. But first of all, I want to ask about that. And then the second question, there are concerns, and I want to hear from you if you think that these are real concerns, valid concerns, or if there's a way to make sure that this is not an issue. There are concerns around knowing where the gas that comes from Turkey is coming from, if there is potentially a risk of having some Russian gas blended into that without having additional information around it. Is that a real concern, or do you feel like there's some guardrails to have better information around that? Minister, let's start with you on both of these. I know I gave you all the easy ones.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Certainly, we want to expand our gas storage capacity. As I said, we're close to 90%, nearing 90% by September 1st, allowing some gas from Moldova to be stored in Romania as well. So clearly there's a need to store more gas. The system was projected to essentially offer the country, gas independence or close to independence in the context of a normal winter, whatever that is these days. So even looking ahead, given what is projected, we should be completely self-reliant this winter. But I do believe that in the evolving regional context, we should increase this capacity and be able to service other countries in our neighborhood. I know there are concerns about storing gas in Ukraine for obvious reasons. I think in the short to medium term, We can provide that alternative at a reasonable cost. And as for the source of gas, that is one of my concerns. I asked that at the beginning of my mandate because the media asked me. They said, is Romania importing any Russian gas? And I said, no, not that I'm aware of. Can you clearly make that statement and define that that molecule of gas has nothing to do with Russia? That's a very tough thing to do. Maybe we need a better system, a better monitoring system to make sure that these alternative routes have nothing to do with Russian gas. I do think that there are countries in the EU right now that still at least indirectly rely on Russian gas and are helping the Russian economy. I hope there's going to be better monitoring of that.
Thank you so much. I know that's a tough question. Assistant Secretary, any additional thoughts on this and the role that U.S. can play in?
So 3 things. I mean, first of all, for the remainder of this decade at least, Europe has to fill a Russia-sized hole in its gas supply. The United States is going to be a significant contributor to that, but there are also opportunities. After Bucharest, I'll be in Rome. We have an active conversation with our Italian allies about opportunities to salvage more gas in Algeria, in Libya, places where excess gas for now is vented and flared in a way that's both wasteful and environmentally destructive. So we're going to work together with Europe on that aspect of the story for sure. On storage, because Europe is largely off of Russian pipeline gas at this point, storage capacity becomes imperative. In the winters historically, Russia was that storage reserve. So there are opportunities. We're talking to Bulgaria next door, for instance, about some significant storage proposals that Bulgaria is working on. We are very supportive of what Ukraine has been doing, including working jointly with the energy community on the clarification of the European regulations and Ukrainian rules to facilitate storage. And I discussed these issues 2 weeks ago with the CEO of Naftogaz, and Mr. Chernysov was justifiably proud of the contracts that they have now secured with leading both European traders and leading European oil and gas companies for storage in Ukraine's existing cavities. So that is happening right now. And it's a contributor to European energy security. And it also helps Ukraine to continue to develop that Western-facing orientation of its energy system. And then finally, to say on this, we are very, very focused on the pathway from fossil gas to green hydrogen. And I think this is an area where North America, Europe, Japan, Korea, India, a small number of countries are going to really lead the way, both in terms of the investment in capacity for the manufacture of that clean hydrogen, but also to develop the technology for hydrogen blending, for hydrogen turbines, for pipelines, figuring out how to carry this. In Europe, in the long term, because of the physics of transporting hydrogen, much of the use is going to be close to the location of manufacture. But Europe's existing legacy gas pipeline network, which is one of the world's most developed, is an obvious asset, and we want to work together to think about how that can be repurposed for a decarbonized future.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to remind our both digital, virtual, and our in-person audience to please raise your hand if you're here in person, and you can submit your questions online if you are joining us virtually. Already quite a few excellent questions are coming in, and I'll try to get to as many of these as possible. We already made really good progress. But I will ask you our next question more around the clean energy opportunities and the importance of clean energy in times of energy crisis, and as countries pay attention to where, how much of the energy they're importing, the reliance on external supply chains, but not just clean energy, but also energy efficiency and how that has changed over the last couple of years. Minister, there's some exciting developments happening in Romania regarding some auctions for contracts for difference and some support for clean energy development. How has that shifted the perspective for the private sector as they consider Romania to potentially expand, whether it's solar, wind, or other clean energy technologies?
There's a lot of interest in the market for new solar projects and wind projects. Much of that is fueled by the market, but some of it is fueled by the availability of grants, EU funds. Last year, we launched a call of about 0.5 billion euros for solar and wind. We received 700 applicants. We'll probably finance about half of them. We're still processing and evaluating, but that just speaks to the interest in the market for these types of projects. They're quite profitable if you look at the numbers. So, now we will have this new mechanism called contracts for difference. I understand it started in the UK, and it's a very smart way of ensuring that the investor has a relatively fixed price over the course of the project, which in energy tends to be 10, 15 years. So you have a reference price, and when the price in the market is above it, then you essentially pay back to the counterparty that difference. If the price in the market is below the reference price, then you get paid by the counterparty. So we're about to make that operational next year. But this year, we're already going to have tenders for these types of contracts for, I think, 2 gigawatts, 1 gigawatt for solar, 1 gigawatt for wind. It's just another way in which we're ensuring that investments in green energy keep happening, with additional concern and attention dedicated to storage. Because by relying more on green energy, you rely on a less predictable source of energy with a lot more variability from day to night or from season to season. And you do run the risk of undermining the balance of the system, which is why you need storage capacity, batteries, as well as pumped hydro.
Thank you. Ambassador, what are you hearing from Western or U.S. companies specifically in terms of questions, or are they paying attention to these opportunities, or are there still concerns and challenges in terms of for them to be able to fully go into Romania and take advantage of some of the recent developments?
So again, first of all, I would note the resolution of the issue with Carlyle, which was a really important confidence message to the marketplace. One of the challenges that we face in getting American companies to come into this sector in Europe is all the opportunities in the U.S. The president has been out west the past couple of days. One of the things the minister and I have in common is time in California. And you see how fast the U.S. energy economy is changing. But I think one of the things that the Inflation Reduction Act and the very rapid acceleration of renewables deployment in the United States is accomplishing is it's driving down costs and it's accelerating innovation. And I am confident, given the billions of dollars of trade and investment that flow across the Atlantic Ocean, that this is going to be a very positive driver of future growth in our energy and economic relationships across the transatlantic environment, but especially so in places like Romania, where there's a very strong foundation of support for the US-Romania alliance and a comfort with the United States and the US-Romania relationship. And I know that our ambassador and the team in Bucharest is strongly committed also to continuing to build these opportunities.
If I can just add something quickly. We have so much potential for renewable energies, solar and wind. The last thing we want to do is import everything from certain parts of the world, which we are, unfortunately, right now. So this is a public call for U.S. companies to come look at the Romanian market and the rest of Europe. It's a large market. There's a huge potential. Just in offshore wind, the estimated potential in the Black Sea is 75 gigawatts. We may never exploit it all, but 10, 15 gigawatts we will over the next decade. We would love to have equipment that is made in the US or that is made in Romania by US companies. And if you look at the trade numbers, despite our exceptional relationship, there's a huge potential to grow. And Mr. Ambassador always says this. He always cites these numbers. If you compare Romania to Poland or even Hungary, you can see that there's, for the size of the market, the trade balance with the U.S. has a lot of room to grow.
You both mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act. And I know initially there were some tensions around the rollout. Do you feel like we are getting past the initial tensions around some of the initial surprises around the act? Do you feel like we're at a point where U.S. and Europe, in countries like Romania, are at a point where we can really focus on areas where we can cooperate together on some of these clean energy technologies that are being supported by IRA?
Well, we were talking yesterday a little bit about this and remembering a time when some folks were interested in promoting this idea of old and new Europe and a sort of competition with the U.S. or between Europe and the United States of America. I think that we're way beyond that. And what has happened in Ukraine with the Russian aggression, as well as evolutions in China in recent years, they all tell us that we need to work together, that we are on the same team, and there's no other way to do that. The more we compete with each other, the more others move ahead. And they move ahead more quickly because, well, they're not really liberal democracies, and that usually means that they move faster than we can, beyond checks and balances. So I think that we're certainly on the same side, and this strategic partnership is part of that story, that Europe and the U.S. should work together, and that's always what we have said in all the fora, even on national security, on the debate about having an EU-level armed forces and so on and so forth, and the debate between that and NATO. We will always support transatlantic partnership.
Thank you. Ambassador, do you agree?
I agree emphatically, and I would just add one other element, which is the solid foundation, the ultimate foundation of our transatlantic relationship is our democracies and our people. And the fact that we have here, I'm sitting next to a Romanian energy minister with a degree from Harvard, a degree from Stanford, years of experience in the United States. That's the mortar that holds this alliance together. And I could not agree more with the minister on the point both about our converging strategic interests, but also the importance of the competition that we're engaged in. And this is the space that I'm responsible for, clean technology, is one where we face a formidable competitor with a very different view of how the world should be organized. And it's really, really important that we bring all of our strengths together, among other things to reinforce our democracies.
Thank you so much. Just a quick check to see if we have any in-person questions. Oh, it looks like we do. We can.
Thank you. 1, 2, oh, there you go. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Dorian. I'm the president of Romanian American Chamber of Commerce here in Washington, D.C., and also co-chair of our D.C. Cybersecurity Task Force. 2 questions, maybe for both of you, if you can. Just comment on this beautiful teamwork that you've been highlighting here in the past hour. Any opportunities or plans that you see in the LNG cooperation? I know it's been discussed, but more practically, how can the United States actually help Romania in developing maybe a terminal or helping exporting these abundance of resources? And second, any plans of securing these critical infrastructure that is going to be developed in Romania and then serving the whole region from a cybersecurity perspective? Maryland, for example, we're right here, and the United States holds one of the best and top solutions in industrial control systems in the world. How can that one help to secure these resources? Thank you.
Please.
Thanks, Dorian. Coming from a friend, these are not easy questions to answer, but well, on LNG, I think it's all a matter of economics. And right now for Romania, it doesn't make much sense unless we have no other option. LNG is not economically viable. As a backup, again, in the context of a very harsh winter, that's something we need to consider, and that's why we have alternatives in Greece and other places. But right now, and with the prospect of Neptune Deep come 2027, it's not really a priority because the economic numbers don't add up. But we're happy to look into that if that changes. On securing critical infrastructure, I'm a huge fan of it, a huge advocate of this idea. In my previous role as Minister of IT, I was responsible for cybersecurity. And I think that Romania is a very good example in our region of very strong cyber expertise, We are hosting in Bucharest the EU Cyber Competence Center, which is essentially an EU-level agency for cybersecurity. And we're very, very proud to do it. And we were chosen because our cyber experts are very, very good. So to the extent that we can contribute that expertise beyond Romania, I think that's something we need to look at and make sure that new technologies like SMRs are properly protected from the very beginning, even taking into account this concept of safe by design. So they need to be designed in a way that ensures cyber protection.
So I would just add to what the minister said on the gas issue, just to emphasize, first of all, we've got a very good conversation ongoing with Romgas on all of these regional connectivities and also the question of how we repurpose, for instance, the Trans-Balkan pipeline to address Ukrainian gas requirements as the war continues and while Ukraine continues to seek to ramp up its own domestic gas production and to separate itself completely and permanently from Russia. The other area where I see great potential, recognizing that Romania has 100 years of history as an oil and gas producer, is all the work and innovation that's happening here in the United States on carbon management. So if you look at what our companies, Exxon, Chevron, Occidental, are doing on carbon sequestration, reducing the carbon intensity of the fossil energy that they do produce, Romania is an obvious partner in Europe for that and has both the technical competence and the geology to be a good partner. And I know that's an area that we're committed to continuing to work together on as well.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more question, but please keep it to 15-second stop and then 30-second answers if possible, just so we can stay on time. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniela Camerath, Romanian American Institute for Smart Energy. Two questions very fast. You've mentioned the human capital in Romania. Thank you for the investment in the E2 Research Center in the Polytechnical University in Bucharest. Would you be open to extend that to other centers in Romania? And also talk about the opportunities in renewables. Minister Burduja, would you please touch on the certifications and permits, how we compare to other countries in Europe?
Go ahead.
Okay. So on human capital, we're definitely willing to look into other academic centers, and I know Nuclearelectrica is exploring that. But I can tell you what Cosmin Ghiță keeps telling me, which is when you're trained on the current machines in Cernavoda, which are based on Candu, you can do anything. They're among the most complicated in the world, which is why I think we have an inherent advantage in operating SMRs, and I'm very strongly supportive of Nuclearelectrica's ambition to operate SMRs in the whole region, not just in Romania. And they're now training new staffers, young people. They're doing young fellowships precisely to fulfill that role. On renewables, my perception initially going into this mandate was that we're not doing great. Then I talked to our agencies, and then they show me the numbers. We're actually not doing bad at all compared to the rest of Europe when it comes to bureaucracy, administrative procedures, the time it takes from permit request to actual approval and implementation. The whole energy sector in the world is changing. That's a given. It's normal to have to wait for a permit for a solar farm. That's just because there needs to be an assessment at the level of the grid, if it's sufficient, if you need to consolidate, to upgrade, to modernize, to replace. And not just Romania is going through these challenges. I think we're not doing bad at all. Happy to explore any solutions from the Institute if you can kindly provide them, and happy to work together with you all.
30 seconds.
Just very quickly, especially on the human capital question. First of all, I know that this is a top priority for our ambassador in Bucharest, and the embassy will be a strong ally. We're, of course, very proud of the nuclear simulator that we've helped to set up in Bucharest. I look forward to seeing that when I'm in Romania next month. And I think I would also flag in this regard, I would usually say I can't speak for NuScale, they're a private company. But I know that NuScale is very, very committed to continuing to reach out and create opportunities to grow the human capital pool and to build the partnership with Romania and with Romanian citizens and Romanian young people in this area.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, as much as I would love to keep this exciting conversation going. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our fantastic speakers, our experts today. Minister Burduja, thank you for joining us. Ambassador Pyatt, it's always a pleasure. And I also want to thank Ambassador Muraru for his excellent opening remarks as well. And of course, it takes a massive team here at the Atlantic Council to make something like this happen. So first of all, I want to thank for his leadership, our Senior Director, Landon Darrence, and of course, our fantastic team here at GEC and Europe Center, Patty Ryan, Lucera Flores, Denise Furtberger, Emma Nix, Maya Sparksman, Jennifer Gordon, Lauren Hughes, and Jasper Giraldi, as well as the Atlantic Council, just broader team who's all been engaged here. So thank you all so much for joining us. I look forward to seeing you both at 3Cs. And thank you to our in-person and our virtual audience. Until next time.